It started with a promise. "You'll always have a home with us, Ma," my son said the day he helped me move out of my little apartment. I had just buried my husband, sold the car, given away most of my clothes and books. "You don't need to worry anymore," he said. "We'll take care of you now." And I believed him, because mothers always want to believe their sons. But the guest room wasn't ready. That's what they told me when we arrived. "We're still reorganizing. You don't mind staying in the basement a little while, do you?" I looked around. Concrete walls, no windows, a thin cot, a single light bulb hanging from a cord, and the washer and dryer humming behind a half-closed curtain. "Just for now," they said. I smiled and nodded, because grief makes you grateful for even a corner of kindness, and I didn't want to be a burden. But a little while became forever days, passed. Weeks, then months. The guest room was still not ready. The boxes never got moved. The mattress was never replaced. And slowly, I disappeared. No one called me upstairs for dinner. They left my meals on a paper plate at the top of the stairs. I wasn't allowed to touch the thermostat. And when guests came over, "She's resting," they'd say. "She likes her privacy." No one ever asked me, because no one ever came down. I wasn't resting. I was wilting. I heard every argument, every slammed door, every joke made about me when they thought I couldn't hear. All she does is sit there. She used to be sharp now. She's just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was surviving. I was grieving in silence, breathing in dust, writing letters I never sent praying to a God I wasn't sure still heard me. And worst of all, I thought maybe I deserved it. How do you disappear in a house full of people? It's strange. You live in the same place, breathe the same air, wash their dishes, fold their laundry, and yet somehow you become invisible. They walked over me, not around me. At first they asked things like, "Mom, do you mind doing a little laundry? Can you keep the kids downstairs while we clean upstairs?" But soon it wasn't a request. The washer became mine. The babysitting became expected. The only time anyone remembered I was there was when something needed folding, fixing, or finding. And even then they didn't say thank you. They said nothing at all. The basement became my cage. I made it as cozy as I could, hung a few rosaries, laid a small rug near the bed, stacked my books on a crate I turned into a shelf. I wrote every night in a journal I kept hidden behind the water heater. One night I wrote, "They gave me this basement as if it were a gift, but I gave them everything I had. My youth, my breath, my strength. And now they give me silence." I didn't want luxury, just respect. I never asked for chandeliers or marble tiles. Just warmth, just conversation, just eye contact that wasn't laced with impatience. One afternoon, I overheard my daughter-in-law on the phone. Yeah, she's still with us. Basically lives in the basement. At least she's out of the way. Out of the way. Like I was furniture. Like I was noise to be muffled, not a soul to be held. I went downstairs and sat on the cot. No tears, no drama. Just one phrase looping in my mind. Out of the way. But something inside me stirred. Not rage, not bitterness, but a faint flicker of something deeper. A memory of who I used to be. Of the woman who held this family up on sore knees and sleepless nights. I looked down at my hands, veined, wrinkled, worn. "You are not a ghost," I whispered. "Not yet." I started taking up space. Quietly, I didn't yell. I didn't demand. I didn't threaten to leave. Instead, I did something much more dangerous to people who rely on your silence. I started being visible. I put my chair back upstairs. It was a simple wooden chair. Paul had carved my name into the bottom when we first married. They'd moved it to the basement for storage. One morning, when the house was empty, I carried it up the stairs, set it by the window in the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, sat. When they came home, I was already there, back straight, hands folded over my cup. No explanation. Just presence. "Oh, hey, Mom," my son muttered. "Hello," I said, sipping. The next day, I made my soup, my own recipe, carrots, thyme, and bone broth. The smell filled the house. My granddaughter Ellie came down and asked, "Grandma, is that yours? It smells like when I was little." I smiled. "Yes, it's mine." She hugged me, longer than usual. Her eyes flicked toward her parents, as if waiting for them to stop her. But they didn't, because for the first time, they weren't sure how. I wrote a letter to myself that night today. You reminded them you exist. Tomorrow, remind yourself why you matter. I tucked the letter under my pillow next to the old photograph of Paul and me, taken on a picnic bench, before life got so noisy and yet so lonely. Then I put up a clock, yes, a clock, in the hallway. They had taken down my old one years ago to modernize the space. I replaced it with a vintage one from the thrift shop. Tick-tock, tick-tock. A reminder that time was still moving, that I was still here, and that they could no longer pretend I wasn't. No longer the maid, no longer the ghost. Something changed that week. Not outside, no one apologized. Not inside the house, at least. But something shifted inside me. And once a woman remembers her worth, even a basement can't hold her. I stopped doing their laundry. For years, I folded socks that weren't mine. Scrubbed stains I never made. Washed sheets I never slept in. One day, I walked past the full basket and didn't touch it. 2 days? 3. By the 4th day, my son asked, "Mom, did you forget the laundry?" I looked him in the eye. No, I remembered me. I took my meals upstairs. No more cold plates left at the top of the stairs. I cooked for myself, set a place at the dining table, a napkin, a fork, a folded prayer before I began. At first, they said nothing, but I saw the looks. Curious, confused, uneasy. They didn't know who I was becoming. But I did. My granddaughter asked the question that broke me one night. Ellie slipped downstairs. She climbed onto my cot and whispered, "Grandma, why do you live here? Don't you miss the sun?" My voice cracked. "Yes, sweetheart, I do." She handed me something her nightlight shaped like a moon. "Then take this, so you don't forget what light looks like." I held that little plastic moon like it was gold. And I cried, for the first time in months. But not because I was broken, because I was healing. The next morning, I left a note, I folded it neatly, left it on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for giving me a basement. But I'm going somewhere that has windows, where my name is said not silenced." I packed one bag, one blanket, and that little moonlight. And I walked out the front door. Not like a ghost, but like a woman finally walking toward the sunlight. When I stepped outside, the morning air didn't feel like escape. It felt like arrival. I wasn't running away. I was walking back into myself. I took the bus with no destination. I sat in the very back, clutching my bag and Ellie's moonlight. The bus driver asked, "Where to, ma'am?" I said, "Anywhere there's a window." He smiled. "I'll take you as far as the sun reaches." That was enough for me. A stranger became my anchor. I ended up in a small town 3 hours away. Quiet streets, a thrift store that still sold cassette tapes, and a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and rain. The owner, Marta, noticed my hesitation at the door. "Looking for something?" she asked. I didn't know what to say. "A job, a chair, maybe a bit of kindness," I whispered. She smiled. "You came to the right place." I became the woman in the apron. Not the basement. Marta gave me a job washing dishes and organizing old recipe books. She gave me something better too, a key to a small room above the cafe. It had lace curtains, a plant on the windowsill, and the kind of silence that heals, not hides. I wrote a new entry in my journal. I once lived under the stairs. Now I wake with the sun on my face. I am not invisible here. I am the woman with the key. I am the woman with the window. I am, finally, the woman who matters. I had been gone for 2 months. No calls, no messages, no one came looking. But that was all right because for once I wasn't living to be found. I was living to be free. I wrote a letter to my grandchildren. I didn't send it through their parents. I sent it through Marta's nephew who lived in the city. He hand-delivered it to Ellie and her younger brother Luke after school. Inside I wrote, "I am not gone. I am not dead. I am becoming someone I should have been long ago. And one day, if you still want to know me, find me where there is cinnamon and kindness." I included a pressed daisy from my new garden. Ellie used to pick them with me before they called me too slow. The children knew before the adults did. That same evening, Ellie wrote me back. Her letter arrived 2 days later. Childlike handwriting, misspelled words, and one beautiful sentence. "Grandma, I want to be like you when I grow up. Brave, not small." I cried, not from pain, but from something deeper. Recognition. My son left a voicemail I didn't expect. A week later, I got a call. I didn't answer. But the voicemail played. "Mom, we didn't mean for things to go that far. I thought you were okay with it all. Call me." I didn't return the call because I wasn't ready to answer with words yet. First, I needed to live my answer, loudly, unapologetically, fully. I hung a sign on my door. The room above the cafe became mine in every way. I painted the door light blue, hung a tiny sign outside. "Welcome to Grandma's, where no one is forgotten." And every night I slept with the window open. Not afraid of the world, not hiding from it, but breathing with it. A knock on the door that changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind where the sky forgets how to stop crying. I had just finished rearranging the cinnamon jars when I heard it. Knock, knock. Not at the cafe below, at my little blue door above. I froze, because only 2 people in the world knew this address. It was her, Ellie, my granddaughter, standing there in soaked shoes, a backpack over her shoulder, and eyes that hadn't stopped searching since I left. "Grandma," she whispered. I opened the door. No questions, no lectures, just arms. We held each other like time had bent backward and forward to get us here. She asked for the story they never told her. Over warm bread and tea, she said, "Mom and Dad told us you were too tired to visit, then said you moved away, then said maybe you didn't want to come back." I looked her in the eye. "Sweetheart, I never stopped loving you. I stopped disappearing for people who forgot I was there." She blinked, nodded, and took my hand. "Tell me everything, Grandma. I want to know who you really are." I showed her the basement key I still had it, tied to a piece of twine. Not as a token of pain, but as a reminder I once lived like a ghost. Now I am a witness. To survival, to resilience, to rebirth. That night she slept in the window room with me. 2 beds, 2 dreams, 1 legacy being rewritten. And as she drifted to sleep, Ellie whispered, "Grandma, do you think people can change?" I answered softly, "Yes, but sometimes you have to change first so they can follow your light." The son who thought she'd never return it was only a matter of time. When Ellie went back to the city, she left a note on the kitchen table. "Dad, I found Grandma. She's not who you said she was. She's more. Come talk to her if you still know how." A week later, he came. I saw his car from the cafe window. He didn't rush in, didn't slam doors, just stood outside the blue door, like a boy who knew he was late. I opened the door slowly. My son now grayer thinner, but still holding that tired authority in his eyes. "Hi, Mom." It took everything in me not to fall apart at those 2 words, because for too long he didn't say them. He sat at my table, but not above me. He looked around the room at the plants, the books, the quiet strength of it all. "I didn't know you'd rebuild your life. I didn't even think you'd want to." I smiled, but it wasn't soft. "You didn't think I had one." He flinched. "I was scared. Of your aging, of your needs, of what it would mean for us. It was easier to make you small. I didn't offer forgiveness. I offered truth. You didn't put me in a basement, Michael. You put me in a memory box, and then tried to close the lid." Silence. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know what else to say." I gave him the basement key. I placed it on the table between us. "You don't need to say anything right now, but take this. Not as guilt as history. Let it remind you what happens when we forget the hands that held us." He picked up the key, held it like it was heavier than it looked. Before he left, he asked one question. "Can I come back again with Ellie? Maybe build something new?" I looked him in the eyes and said, "Only if you come through the front door this time." He nodded, and this time he left like someone who hoped to return. She wasn't just Grandma anymore, she was the guide. The days grew longer, warmer. So did the visits. First Ellie, then her little brother Luke, then surprisingly, Michael, my son. They didn't come out of guilt. They came with notebooks, questions, and quiet ears. Because for the first time, I wasn't just Grandma. I was a woman with a story. They asked me about the years I went silent. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Grandma Luke asked, legs swinging off the kitchen stool. I paused, then said, "Because I was afraid of being called dramatic. Afraid my pain would inconvenience the people I loved most." Ellie nodded slowly. "But it wasn't dramatic. It was real." "Yes, child, and real things are often the ones no one wants to hear." I became the storyteller I never had every Sunday they came, and I told them everything. Not just about the basement, but about my dreams, the dances I skipped, the letters I never sent, the sacrifices I made in silence. I became a mirror, not just of what was lost, but what could still be found. I took them to the basement one sunny afternoon. I asked to go back. Back to the house. Michael agreed. When we arrived, I asked them not to speak, just walk. We opened the basement door. Still dusty, still cold, still echoing with things I never said aloud. I placed a small mirror in the corner to remind the silence that someone is watching now. I was no longer just a memory keeper, but a memory maker. They cried, so did I. Not for the pain, but for the truth finally seen. Because sometimes the most sacred redemption isn't found in justice. It's found in being remembered right. The day she celebrated herself. No permission needed, it started with a single sunflower. Bright, bold, unapologetically radiant. Ellie brought it one morning saying, "It reminded me of you growing, even in the dark." That flower sat on my windowsill for a week. Then something inside me said, why not more? I planned a party for me, no anniversaries, no birthdays, no milestone worth clapping for in anyone else's calendar. Just this, a party to honor the day I chose to come back to life. Michael was confused. Luke was curious. Ellie. She grinned like she'd been waiting for this all along. The invitations were simple. Handwritten cards that read, "You are invited to witness the woman who rose from the basement. No return address, no RSVP. You came if you wanted to see me. You stayed if you deserved to see me shine." The room was filled with yellow tablecloths, yellow ribbons, yellow lanterns glowing like soft declarations of survival, and in the center me, wearing the dress I never wore at my own wedding. Not because I wasn't allowed, but because I wasn't seen. Now I wore it for no one but myself. I gave a speech with my head high. I stood up with shaking hands, but a steady voice. They said I was too old to matter, too tired to dream, too soft to resist. But I am here, still, and louder in silence than they ever were in noise. This is not revenge. This is rebirth. The room went quiet, then thundered, not in applause, but in the sound of truth finally landing. A face from the shadows, and a secret buried for decades. The party had ended. The laughter lingered like perfume in the room. I was gathering napkins when I saw him, standing at the edge of the porch, same coat, same eyes. The neighbor boy, except now a man. His name was Thomas. He stepped forward with an envelope. We hadn't spoken since I moved into the basement. Back then, he was just 17, helping shovel snow, taking out trash, glancing toward our kitchen window like he wished someone would call his name. Now he stood before me older, but carrying something familiar guilt wrapped in gentleness. "Mrs. Harris," he said softly, "I've held this for years." He handed me an envelope, faded, sealed, unopened. Inside was a letter from my husband. I hadn't seen my husband's handwriting since the funeral. But there it was. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back from the hospital. I asked Michael to give you this, but if he didn't, Thomas has a copy. I asked him to be your backup, because I know my son, and I fear his fear will become cruelty. I stopped breathing. My husband had known and planned. The letter continued. You gave me your life. You deserved better. If Michael fails, you don't forget who you are. You're not a basement, you're a cathedral. Spend the insurance. Live somewhere sunny. Tell the grandkids who you really are. And if you ever need help, Thomas has the account details. I trust him more than I trust my own blood. Thomas looked at me tearful. I didn't give it to you before. I was scared. I thought maybe it was too late. But after seeing your light today, I knew you were finally ready to receive the truth. And I was, because sometimes the truth can't bloom until you do. She bought the house that tried to bury her. I stared at the account number scribbled inside the letter. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for one more chapter 1 I got to write. Thomas offered to help. I shook my head. This time I'll knock on the front door myself. I walked up to the house I once called prison. The curtains were different, the paint fresher, but the silence behind those windows still heavy. Michael had moved out. The house was listed for sale. I stood on the porch where I was once locked out and rang the doorbell like it never broke me. I'd like to make an offer, I said to the realtor. She blinked at me uncertain. For yourself, no, I said. For the women who were told they were too much, and yet never enough. I didn't flinch when I signed the deed. Didn't cry when I walked through the basement. I just whispered, I remember, but I don't belong here anymore. The basement became a healing room, not a prison, not a punishment. A space with soft lights, blankets, books, mirrors with affirmations etched around the edges. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are still becoming. I invited women, older, forgotten. They came. And we sat in a circle of chairs once used for judgment, now reserved for rebirth. It wasn't about revenge, it was about redefinition. I didn't want anyone to suffer. I just wanted the walls to witness truth for once. And in doing so, I became the grandmother I always wished I had. One who rose from silence and planted gardens in every room where she once wasn't allowed to speak. The grandchild who thought I was dead. It was a Sunday afternoon, the windows open, the scent of jasmine drifting through. A knock at the door, soft, unsure. I opened it to find Ellie, not my Ellie, but Ellie's younger sister, Sarah. She looked pale, holding an old photograph, one with my face circled in red marker. Are you, her, she whispered. I nodded slowly. She began to cry. They told us you were gone, that you died when we were little. My knees almost buckled. I invited her in, made tea, listened as she told me what they remembered, which wasn't much, because Michael had erased me. Photos taken down. Stories stopped mid-sentence. My name never mentioned again. But kids know what's missing. I always felt someone was missing, Sarah said. She showed me a box she'd kept hidden. Inside an old scarf I knitted. A note I wrote in a birthday card. Pieces of a woman she was told didn't exist. She never stopped wondering. You were the dream I wasn't allowed to have, she said. I gave her the full story. No sugarcoat, I told her about the basement, the silence, the letter, the house, and how I chose to rise not for revenge, but to reclaim truth. She cried again, this time not for the years lost, but for the woman she could finally touch. We sat together generations reconciling in quiet grace. She came back with friends, not just cousins, but her college classmates. Young women looking for stories that felt like armor. They didn't come for sympathy. They came to learn how to stand. And so I spoke, not as a victim, but as proof, that even when your family buries your name, you can still resurrect it. The book I was never supposed to write, Sarah, brought me a leather journal. Blank. Bound. Beautiful. Write it all down, Grandma, the real version. Not the one they told us, the one that hurts, the one that heals. I stared at the pages for hours, hands trembling. Not from age, but from the weight of being silent too long. Then I wrote the first line. They buried me in a basement, but I became the foundation. Page by page, I reclaimed my name. I didn't write with bitterness, I wrote with fire. I wrote the nights I cried into towels so no one would hear. I wrote the mornings I made breakfast for people who never said thank you. I wrote the day I was locked out of my own house, and the day I bought it back. The pen became my sword, the pages my resurrection. Sarah shared my words online, one chapter, then another. Soon, strangers were reading my story, commenting, messaging, sending photos of their own grandmothers reading aloud by kitchen light. One message read, I showed this to my mom. She cried. She's 78 and still apologizes for existing. I cried too. Not from pain this time, but because my scars were saving someone else's mother. I was no longer invisible. I was a mirror. Women began coming to the house, to the room that was once my prison, now called the Room of Return. They read their stories. We lit candles for the names they weren't allowed to say out loud. We laughed. We mourned. We made space. And every woman who stepped inside left with one message engraved in her heart. Your story didn't end when they forgot you. It began when you remembered. And still, I had one more chapter left. Because there was someone I hadn't written about yet. Someone I was saving for the final pages. The one who took the keys, changed the locks, and shut the door on his own mother. My son. The day I forgave the son who locked me out. He didn't expect the knock. Michael opened the door slowly, gray in his beard lines on his face, but still wearing the same eyes that once looked through me. We stood there, two strangers made of the same blood. Hi, Mom. It was the first time he said it in years. He waited for me to yell. I didn't. I didn't scream. Didn't throw the past at him like a weapon. I just handed him something small wrapped in cloth. He opened it and his hands shook. It was the house key, the one he had taken away, the one I had replaced. I don't need this anymore, I said. But maybe you do. He cried like the boy he once was. I thought I was protecting my family, he whispered. No, I said. You were protecting your fear. We sat down, mother and son, two survivors of different stories. He asked me why I forgave him. Because forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I refuse to carry. He came to my circle. One day quietly, Michael entered the Room of Return. He didn't speak. He just listened, to women, to pain, to power. He didn't ask for redemption, but he stayed. He brought others. He rebuilt chairs, repainted walls, made tea for guests. Not because he was making up for the past, but because he was choosing a better one. My name was never useless. It was unfinished. I gave everything, and they gave me a basement. But I turned that basement into a stage, a shelter, a sanctuary. And in the end, they couldn't bury me, because I bloomed too loudly. This is not a story of revenge. This is the resurrection of a woman who was never meant to disappear.